In a world where film, television, video games, technology, toys, lawnmowers, dark matter.
Wait a minute. Lawnmowers, dark matter?
Sorry. Where most of those things meet, one podcast stands alone, going behind the scenes.
Hold on to your butts.
I love it when a plan comes together.
You're listening to the Mediajuice podcast.
Howdy, howdy. Jeremy Sneed here with my producer, Jeremiah Isley.
That's me. How's it going, everybody?
With another episode of the Mediajuice podcast. Mediajuice. It's media and it's juice. 2017 Mediajuice.
Absolutely.
Rights reserved.
All of them. Reserve all those rights.
What if that was our tagline? And maybe it will be.
Maybe it just became that.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so this is a fun episode. My friend Randy Pitchford is going to be on the show. I've known Randy for about, years, 10 years, 7 years. And we're going to be talking with him about all kinds of fun stuff. Of course, Randy, as you know, co-founder of Gearbox Software, Borderlands, Brothers in Arms. And they recently actually launched Gearbox Publishing, I think maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, where they're doing some of their own titles.
Yeah, I just saw something about We Happy Few that they're working on, which looks super, super sweet.
So people should check that out if they haven't seen. Of course, Gearbox, as you know, has a long-time publishing partnership with 2K, but they've been doing some of their own stuff. So if you check out their Facebook and website, I think gearboxsoftware.com, they've gotten 2 or 3. I think they did Duke Nukem, which we did the trailer for, Bulletstorm, and they've got trailers for some other ones that are out there. So that'll be fun to talk to Randy. And what else we got going, Jeremiah?
Oh, we're going to take a look behind the curtain and talk about what sounds like a fantastic job to do, which is capturing gameplay. And
yes,
we're also going to talk about some VR stuff, like your new cool VR rig.
Oh yeah,
cutscene segment. And then we're gonna take a look at some script notes and answer messages from listeners just like you.
Just like you. You too can call in. Well, you can't call in.
Don't call in because we're not giving you our phone numbers, but you can always.
Maybe we should start that. Maybe we should get like
a hotline.
A hotline. People can leave voicemails.
I'm all for it. Let's dig into that further. I think that'd be fun.
Okay.
You could actually be on the show.
Stay tuned for a call-in line at the Mediajuice Studios podcast, One Juicy Podcast.
Pardon me, sir. That's One Juicy Podcast. If I do say so myself. But I think that's enough of this intro. What do you say we jump in and take a look at what's coming up?
Can we not make the flops?
The holodeck is going to be the last invention.
This awesome, wonderful, heavenly job that you are going to tell me about.
Hopefully I'm still a gamer at that time. We're here at another edition of what we call the Green Room, and I've got my friend Randy Pitchford with us here. And Randy and I met years ago when I was in early days of shooting Video Games the Movie and doing research and research on game history. Of course, you're going to come across Randy Pitchford, and they're right here in our backyard in Dallas, Texas. And I reached out to Randy and the Gearbox team and just said, I'd love to include you guys. And it was sort of like I wanted, a dime and they gave me $1. It was like, yes, you can come interview Randy. You can have access to Gearbox for B-roll. Randy introduced me to Cliff Bleszinski and a lot of other people. And then from there, it's just, we've done projects for Gearbox at Mediajuice, for Homeworld, and all kinds of stuff. And Randy was on Unlocked, The World of Games Revealed, the follow-up to Video Games that came out in December. And I don't know, did you officially introduce me to Penn Jillette, or was that just sort of
I did.
No,
yes. I did. Yeah. You were telling me about the show, and talking about the celebrity hosts that that you wanted to have on the show, and I thought of Penn because he's been a longtime advocate for video games as an art form, and so I recommended him, and I made that introduction for you.
Yeah, I think I was telling Randy about after video games had come out, this idea about Unlocked and that I wanted to do a series of episodes focusing on the developer community and, just go a little bit deeper in terms of some of the top designers, developers out there, which of course Gearbox is one of. And Randy just said, "Do you know Penn Jillette?" And I was like, "Well, I know of him." And it all came together. Penn came to Dallas. We brought him to Dallas, and we had this sort of epic 2 days of, Randy helped to found the Video Game Museum, which is in Frisco, and we filmed at Gearbox and at the Game Museum, which Randy helped to coordinate. So first of all, thank you for all of that.
Yeah, man, that was a lot of fun. What a great start. And I'm glad to know you. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun. And, I know Jeremiah had some questions too. Both he and I, of course, are big Gearbox and Borderlands and just Gearbox IP in general fans. I wanted to, just for the listeners out there, can you give just a crash course on how you got into game design? I'm sure you've gotten this question a million times, but for all those aspiring game designers, artists, creators out there, what was the germ of the idea or the conversation that said, okay, I think I can do this?
When I was a kid, my dad was a nerd, so we had computers around the house as long as I could remember, and back at the dawn of home computing, you didn't get an operating system really. You didn't get a lot of programs. What you got was this machine, and were the programming instructions. So if we had to learn how to program if we wanted to get the computer to do anything at all. So I was learning programming at a very, very young age. And I was able to get access to some programs. My dad would bring home things back, we would buy a magazine, and you would type in the source code that was printed in the pages of the magazine, and then you'd run that source code, and that's how you could play the game that was in the magazine.
Wow.
And I was not only just, becoming a human robot, just, translating the instructions by typing them, reading them from the page and typing them into the computer. I was also kind of noticing some of the patterns there. It was like I was learning the language that way as well, learning how the techniques through seeing how other people accomplish things. There was a game that really got under my skin. It's an ancient game. It's a game that was sort of an ancestor to Zork. It was called the Colossal Cave Adventure. It was a text adventure, and I'd gotten a copy of this, and it was a compiled copy that ran on the CPN-based system my dad built for me, and I loved it. And it felt like the whole world. It felt like I could just freely explore this universe, and everything was there to be discovered. And no one could see what I was doing, so I could explore this with freedom and liberty, and I loved that. And I started getting curious about it. So my dad taught me how to use a hex editor, so I was able to look at the code. Now this was compiled code, so most of what I'd look at in the hex editor of the compiled code was just garbage, but all the text strings, all the English text strings would appear as text, and so I was able to learn like the parser and all the different words that the parser could understand, the vocabulary of the game, and I was able to read all the descriptions of all the different locations and all the different objects you can collect, and I was learning more about the game was constructed by reading that, and then I got a copy of the game that was ported to the TRS 80 by Scott Adams, and it was written in BASIC. And BASIC is an interpreted language, and that means that if you can run the program, you can look at the source code. So boom, I had source, and I was looking at how he did the game, and I learned a lot about his techniques. And then I started trying to make my own text adventure games. And I remember one of the earliest programs I'd made, I said to myself, I'm going to write Dungeons and Dragons. Like that was the starting.
Nice.
Like I'm gonna make a computer program, and it's just gonna be Dungeons and Dragons. And I get through a very rudimentary character generator, and I've completely filled up all of the RAM that the computer has. So that's, I just got to generate a character. But then I later started learning techniques to be more optimal and building, rooms. I learned a technique called a dimensional array, where I can create a virtual array of spaces that you could populate with descriptions, and you make a virtual dungeon. And I went through I could go step by step through the process, but it started there. And I had the bug, man. And I learned how to code. There was one time we had this one computer. It was a Timex Sinclair 1000. It was it was a great little machine, and I was tinkering with it and learning how what special instructions it had. And there were instructions where you can draw graphics on the screen, and the graphics were these black and white blocks basically. And so I said, I'm gonna reverse engineer Pac-Man, and I'm gonna rewrite Pac-Man. So I started working on Pac-Man for the Timex Sinclair 1000, and it was a much slower machine than whatever was running Pac-Man. So my version of Pac-Man was turn-based. You would tell Pac-Man which way you wanted to move, and it would take about 8 seconds for the screen to refresh. It would go draw character by character. In addition, the Pac-Man was just a block, and the ghosts were the same exact blocks, so the ghosts and Pac-Man looked identical. And I did not have the memory or the experience back then to do a true collision system. So you could move Pac-Man through walls if you wanted, so you had to play Pac-Man on the honor system. Don't let him walk through walls. But I did it. I was able to generate a maze and update the character when you'd move it, and update the position of the ghosts. And I had them staying within the maze, even if Pac-Man wouldn't. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
It's interesting, just as you were talking about, getting bit with the bug and the different hardware and learning programming at a very rudimentary level. It's like I'm trying to draw parallels, and I think about when I first got into filmmaking or got bit with that bug, it was very much about, okay, what will this lens do? Okay, oh wow, 50 millimeter lens gives me a really shallow depth of field, and I can do this really cool stuff with f-stops. And if I get a telephoto lens, it'll do this. And getting really into the gear, which then makes you learn the language of filmmaking, of cinematography. And then it's like, as you learn the technical, for me anyway, it was like, okay, now that I understand the technical, I feel more freedom in the art form. When did you feel like you hit that stride technically and artistically, where there was a little bit of a handoff to where you're like, okay, I don't need to worry about the technical anymore. Now I can just start running with the creative and the story.
Well, I think as a medium, I think we're still going to always be worrying about the technical. That's one of the things I love about video games. And this might be where it contrasts with filmmaking a little bit. There is a point in filmmaking where I know you feel enough mastery with the technique that you can focus on the story. Whereas, with video games, it feels like we're not merely inventing the story and the gameplay, but we also have to create the technology each time. So it's like we're inventing the camera. Yep. It's like we're inventing the camera every single time we're trying to make a film. And it's, on the software side, it's a little less like that. There's other folks that are constantly pushing the boundary with hardware, but we have to understand how to interface with that hardware and how to utilize that hardware and communicate with it to get it to do what we want. And that's a constantly moving target. And I think that's what's so stimulating about the game industry, right? Because check this out, right? So on the story side, on that creative side, it's very subjective. It's very emotional, and it's super fluid and dynamic, and it's an intangible like art. Meanwhile, on the hardware engineering and software engineering side, these are like hard sciences. This is math and in physics. And to have this medium that jams together and requires a perfect choreography between, this very hard science set of solutions for technology to marry and mingle with this very soft art kind of stuff that you get with storytelling and entertainment. I don't know of any other medium that has these two worlds colliding as a requirement, as a prerequisite.
As a requirement,
for the result. Yeah, and it's so stimulating. I think if it was hard science only, I probably would not be as engaged with this. And I think if it was art only, I'd probably there's things you get, it's tough to be an artist, man. There's a lot of self-hate and self-doubt on the art side of it. So it's nice to be able to buy and brute force and hard science get some of the way there to take some of the risk out of that.
Well, and it's, as you were saying that, it makes me think about, like, there's so many, myself included, filmmakers that anytime there's a new camera or technology, or, oh, now we're going 4K, now we're going 8K, you just dive into it headlong, because there is these long gaps, I feel like, in with cinematography and stuff. And some people may disagree with me and say that filmmaking and lensing and cameras are ever evolving, and they are, but definitely not at the pace that gaming does, as you said, every single time. And so, like, becoming a gearhead as a filmmaker is almost part of an alleviation of the stress of always focusing on the story and on the art of it, and not having that outlet, which I think the technical side is kind of an outlet. I mean, you have to be bent towards that, but it's such a challenge to rise to every time. That it's like it just keeps those muscles from atrophying. You just have to be on your A game every single title.
And the fact is, you have to be on your A game just to play. And whether you're on your A game or not does not guarantee you any kind of result. Right? Mm. Like, there's been times when there's a lot of things we could have done a lot better, but it turns out, holy crap, the product totally works in the marketplace and it's selling great and people are loving it. And all those things we thought were places where we maybe could have done better, didn't matter. And there's other times where we absolutely freaking kill ourselves and we think, this is it. We got it. And then we put it out there and the world's like, sorry, that's crap, dude. It's garbage. And you're like, what am I doing?
Who am I?
Yeah, exactly.
I know it. It's such a, it's so true. And you've obviously got so much more experience and more titles, quote unquote, under your belt than I do. But you're right. I mean, it's tough to be an artist. It's tough to know. It's the old, I'm sure you've heard this story, but it's Steven Spielberg famously tells the story about their meeting with these Japanese investors, and they're explaining show business and movie making to them. And they're like, okay, here's how it works. We're going to make 20 movies this year. 10 of them will lose money on, not big losses, but we won't make our money back. 5 of them will make our money back. 3 of them will make our money back and then some, and then 2 of them will be hits. And then something like, 2 or 3 of them will be total flops. We'll lose our shirts on them. And that, they asked if there was any questions, and a little Japanese businessman in the corner raised his hand and said, "Can we not make the flops?" And they're like, "Oh, that's not how the math works."
And anyone who's done it, we know that's a punchline. We laugh, but to anyone on the outside, it seems like, well, all right. You do know the difference. Yeah, I love that story. That's so great. Yeah, I'll tell you though, it's interesting. My seed is interesting. When I started out, everything I did, I was a one-man show. So in that experience, like, I hated every single thing I did because I could see only the flaws, and I'd have to I never really even felt like I finished any of it. I just sort of would give up because nothing was ever good enough. It was only when I started working with other people, and it's funny, the other people that create things, I think we, like, people that just have to make stuff, we have this vision in our head of what we want it to be, and that's kind of perfect. But then the reality of when you have to manifest a thing, it's going to be some compromised, shitty, difference between what we envision and what reality is. I think of, like, when Da Vinci was painting the Mona Lisa, I'm sure that was perfect in his mind. And when he looks at the result, it's like, fuck, like, the imperfections in the paint, and, and look at where the lighting's not right, and there's little issues with perspective or proportion that are just micro, and only he sees them, and because we don't know what he was imagining, we can just appreciate the beauty of what he created. But since he knows what he was imagining, it's not good enough. And I think all artists have that. I think it's necessary. I think we just stop if we felt like we could do what we thought we wanted to do, because it'd just be easy. I think it's like the fact that it sucks to us is why we have to keep going. It's like, oh, it's not good. Let me try again.
Oh, yeah.
But what's cool is when I started working with a team, like when I'm looking at everybody else's work, I'm able to see it like the audience. Like I'm looking at the Mona Lisa and going, oh, it's beautiful. And they're all like, oh, my shit sucks, right? And they're looking at my stuff and going like, oh, man, that's really good. And I'm like, no, dude, my shit sucks. So it's with a team that we're able to finally get together and actually, produce something, because we can all admire each other's work, even if we hate our own.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic in, but not just with larger developers, but I think Gearbox in general. I've been around you guys long enough to sort of get a vibe of the culture, and as you've said many times, your job is to kind of plant a stake in the ground and get everyone to rally around that. And I think I couldn't agree more about the self-hate of this is what I want. This Mount Olympus is my goal. And then, if you get to Everest, then that's acceptable for everyone else, but not for you. But then it ultimately has to be, you have to reach for the stars and to keep, outdoing yourself. And I think if you hit the target every time, it's just, it's too robotic. It's like, we were talking to Tom Kalinske, Tom Kalinske.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were just talking about how healthy it is for there to be competition, and how healthy it was to have limitations in technology back in the day, which pushed the art form. And the analogy was, well, it's kind of like, having good bacteria in your stomach. It's like, well, if it was completely sterile environment, that's actually bad for you. You need some of the gunk, some of the bad stuff to make your digestion work. And it's like gaming and artistry is the same way. You got to have some of that self-hate. You got to have some of that not hitting the mark exactly right to keep going.
So let me ask you, with that, you have these games that kind of start as a story or as a realm or a world that you're trying to kind of create. And we've talked a lot about limitations, the technology, the software, whatever it is that you're working with. Has there ever been times where or maybe there are projects that you're like, we just don't have the ability to do this yet, and you've really just kind of put them on the shelf, and you're just waiting to take them back off the shelf and go, now we can actually do this. We can actually realize this vision.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So actually, yes. That before I started making video games, when I lived in LA and Hollywood, I was a magician. I was a professional magician. So my prior career before being a video game developer was as a magician. And when I moved out to Texas and started making games professionally, not just as a hobby, it's always been on my mind. How do I use all this stuff I know and all this capability and magic? How do I use this in interactive entertainment? And a lot of the principles and philosophies have been applied, but I haven't been able to do anything that's straight up magic. And it's usually a consequence of interface and feedback. And now it looks like, because of some of the recent efforts to push virtual reality, that there might actually be a market for VR enough to make a product that can justify its cost against sales to consumers for software. And that was enough for me to go, okay, let's do it. I mean, I got into the video game business in, the early 90s, and it's now 2017. And it's taken all this time before I felt like, okay, now I think the technology is in consumers' hands, where we can do magic at a video game. And so I'm working on this project right now with Penn and Teller. It's called Penn and Teller's. It's called Penn and Teller's Cruel Virtual Tricks for Real People, and it's and we're using VR to let you fuck with your friends, basically, to let you just wreck them. And it couldn't exist before VR. And VR has been around for a while, but it hasn't been commercially accessible by consumers. Now consumers can have VR at home. And lots of them do. There are currently millions of people with virtual reality at home, and more are trying it every day. And this market isn't as large as, say, Xbox or PlayStation customers, and it's certainly nothing compared to people with phones that can play video games on them. But it is enough, I think, and we're going to find out if we can actually support the cost of the software development on the backs of what customers want to buy that have VR and are looking for VR content. And we'll find out.
That's cool. That's cool. How long do you think it'll be before that VR platform gets to the point where it's commonplace, like PlayStation has?
Yeah, I don't think that the VR that exists today can be commonplace, because I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But there's a couple things that people have to accept in order to earn the experience that VR offers. I mean, it's an absolutely incredible experience, and anyone that I know that has tried good VR, there's a lot of shitty VR out there,
right.
But if you've tried good VR, you're like, holy crap, this is amazing. But to get that at home, you have to accept a couple of things. The first thing you have to accept is the cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cheap. You either have to have before you even get to the cost of the headset, you have to have either a very expensive PC, or you have to have a video game console and a television, and a good one like a PlayStation 4, or you have to have a very high-end PC, and then you have to buy this headset, which is even more expensive, right?
Yeah.
And so the cost is one barrier. The second barrier, which I think is even greater for some people, is the idea that you've got to put this thing on your face and carry this heavy crap on your head, and that needs to be resolved. So I think there's some future that's where what we're seeing today as VR will be a common ancestor of these various features, and it'll be a future where there's a very inexpensive or free technology that does not require me to put anything on my head, that can give my brain or my eyeballs the experience of virtual reality somehow. That's a ways off. But for now, people that want to, they're either crazy and just take the risk to spend the money and put the thing on their head, will get this holy crap experience. Most of the people that take that risk aren't really taking the risk, because they've been given a demonstration and they've seen the possibilities, because they've actually experienced. They've experienced good VR, and from that they're like, oh, I want more of this, and then they're going to figure out how to have it.
The price tag is definitely hefty to pull that off.
It's completely and we're like really fortunate people living in the West. Imagine the rest of the world. Heck, half the world doesn't even have the lights on yet.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
It's just completely inaccessible. So to get to that place where it's commonplace, it's going to be a long time. You're going to see evolutions and even revolutions on the technology behind it, and a lot of other stuff has to happen before it can actually be commonplace. But for those few of us that get to experience it now, it's like, holy shit kind of experience.
I think you're right too about the taking away the headset, which is, and I'll tell one VR story that has to do with Randy, and Randy, I know we've got to let you go. You've got a time frame.
Thanks.
Randy actually let me borrow his one of the first Oculus development kits when we were starting to shoot Unlocked, and I was going to.
Oh yeah, that was a DK1. That was a DK1 that I loaned you.
Yeah, I didn't have one. And I was like, hey, I'm going to interview Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, and I want to we're doing this whole walkthrough on the state of gaming, and I feel like we'd be leaving out a big chunk if we didn't do VR. So Randy was like, yeah, here. And he couriered over his DK1 Oculus unit. And we went out there and interviewed Kevin Smith. And to your point, Randy, about the headset. So we got it hooked up on Kevin Smith, and we ran several demos, and he was just like, man, this is kick ass. And what would this be like if I was high? And, we tried to put it on, or, get Jay to try it. And he was like, man, is there any way I can do it without the headset? He didn't, that was the barrier to entry for him. He didn't want to put the headset on. And so I think you're right.
There's some reasons, right? One of the reasons is I look like a douche with it. Or one of the reasons is that looks heavy and uncomfortable. Or I don't want my vision blocked. I don't want anyone to be able to mess with me. I feel insecure and uncomfortable if I lose my vision. There's all kinds of reasons why people don't want the headset, but it's a big deal. Most of us don't do that. They won't put it on, but they can't quite tell you why, or they won't tell you why. But Jay was able to get at it and just say it right there.
Yeah. And he's right though too. I mean, I think you're right too, Randy. I think there will come a day that glassesless VR exists. I don't know how
Well, there's a lot of different paths to that. You can either we can either figure out how to get the signal directly to the brain, or we can shoot light at the eye. It's just photons hitting the back of your eyeball, right? So if you can fire off the right photons at your eyeball, and we can see your eyeball now. Vision is good enough, just even relatively, by today's standards, relatively cheap cameras can tell where the eyeball is on a human face, or have a fidelity with the right software to tell where the eyeball is. And then if you have another device that can direct photons at that position, can literally draw the image onto your eye that it wants you to see. Now that gets into a more augmented reality kind of approach, but augmented reality with enough photons shot at your eyeball can completely replace the world you're looking at, instead of just draw on top of parts of it.
Yeah, and I think that's, obviously, all the parallels to the holodeck of that's what VR is ultimately going to be. But that's what you're talking about. I mean, it seems like science fiction, but someday I do feel like, whether it's a gaming pill or whether it's plugged in directly without a headset, that we will experience some version of the holodeck. I don't know if it'll.
Yeah, there's two paths, right? There's two paths. One path is what the holodeck imagines, where it's using some other technology to give stimulus to the senses you already have, right? So in the holodeck, the character's actual eyes are receiving the light from somewhere that makes it look like the environment the way it is, and there's something that they can touch that gives the tactile feedback that fools the touch sense, right? So that's one vector. The other vector is the matrix vector, where the eyes are getting nothing, and the fingers are getting nothing, and the mouth and taste is getting nothing. It's all just going directly into the brain. The brain thinks it's getting the stimulus, but it's just getting the signals are going directly into the brain. And both either could work, but that's what science fiction has hypothesized are two possible end states. One of my partners used to joke that the holodeck is going to be the last invention, because once we can truly have it, where all of our senses think they can be anywhere. Like, you could be anywhere you want to be, doing whatever you want to be doing, eating whatever you want to be eating, making love to whoever you want to be making love to, experiencing anything you want to experience, whether it's real or not. And once you can have that, then why do anything in the real world? And I think there's some truth to the joke, but I will probably still have a job because someone will need to program those machines.
That's right. You'll be sitting outside of the Matrix while we're all in it.
Yes.
Well, last thing I've got for you, Randy, and we'll cut you loose. And I know you get this question a lot, but I think we probably have a lot of aspiring designers, filmmakers, creators that listen to the show. Any advice that you would give to up and comers that are thinking about taking that leap of being a creator of doing something, but just haven't done it yet?
The key is you just got to do it. You got to start anywhere. It doesn't even matter where you start, because the reality is people get good at things that they do a lot of. And you do, if you're not going to do it at all, you'll never get good at it. And everything we try for the first time, we suck at it. Right now, some of us might have, advantages in different directions, but the reality, I don't even believe in talent. I think it's just what we're going to spend a lot of time doing. And it turns out we tend to want to spend a lot of time doing things that we like doing. We think about doing things that we like doing, right? So even when we're not busy or we're busy doing something else, our mind share will engage itself with the stuff that we like. And whatever we're engaged with, the more we do it, the better we get. And the better we get, eventually, you start somewhere, you're going to suck at it. Just keep doing it. If you actually want to do it, you will naturally keep doing it. The people that are going to end up being creators, they can't help it. I can't help it. I have to do what I do. It's not going to, it could be no other way. I just wouldn't be happy unless I'm doing what I'm doing. So I just do it, and I do a lot of it. And after a while, when I was coming up, I started to realize, hey, I think I'm better than that guy.
Right.
Or I think I'm better than her or him. And I start to realize that the more I do things, the better I get at it. And if you keep at it, you'll get into those higher and higher echelons of capability on that vector. And so you just got to start, dive in, don't be afraid. You have to throw away all that self-hate and ignore it. It'll be there because you're going to suck. I think I suck. I suck compared to what I can imagine I can do. I'm terrible. And I'm still trying to figure it out and get better and better at it, and use that to fuel you instead of prevent you from giving it a try. Because if you keep doing it, you'll get better, and eventually you'll be pretty good, and other people will want what you have.
That's great, man. Well, the 10,000 hour rule, very inspiring even to me as a filmmaker. Randy, thanks so much for your time. As always, looking forward to what you guys have cooking over there at Gearbox. In terms of where people can find you online, I'm sure it's Twitter and Facebook and all that.
I have a Twitter account. It's at Duval Magic, DUVALMAGIC. And I read it every day or almost every day, and I interact not infrequently. People that send me messages, I often reply. I don't always reply, but I often do, because we have to decide every day how much of our day we're going to spend making things versus consuming things that other people have made. And I try to keep a healthy balance. I'm not happy unless I'm making things. So, but I like Twitter. I think it's a pretty fast and efficient way of interacting with other people in the world. So that's a good way. But my company website has some other resources, gearboxsoftware.com.
Awesome. Well, Randy,
cool.
Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Good talking with you, man.
Take care.
All right.
See you, Randy.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
We are tonight's entertainment.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You can't handle the truth.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Okay, you know what that means. It is time to take a look behind the curtain. We are going to pay attention to the man behind the curtain, because the man behind the curtain is Jeremy, and he's going to tell us about, like I said in the intro, something that sounds like a lot of fun, and that is gameplay capture. Tell me about this awesome, wonderful, heavenly job that you are going to tell me about.
Well, I thought it's worth talking about, because we touch on it so much with everything we talk about with Mediajuice, because the majority of our clients are video game companies. And, with Anatomy of a Trailer series we launched a couple months ago, we talk about that in just about every episode, capturing gameplay, whether that's for Gearbox or Capcom or Activision or any one of our gameplay clients. So yeah, basically it's exactly what it sounds like. We'll get a build of the game from the publisher, usually a beta build, either on disk or more times than not, just a download of a .rar or PKG file, and load that onto the test kit. We have test kits for, some people call them dev kits, for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, all of the game systems, and then of course, Steam is a lot of games, of course, come out on Steam for PC and Mac, and something in the last, let's say, year and a half, that's made it a little easier is we'll just get invited to a closed beta of the game that the client's working on. And in some instances, it'll be a closed beta, and they've made a special build, call it trailer build for Mediajuice for us. And it'll be something like, with the HUD turned off, the heads-up display will be turned off, God mode turned on where we can control the camera, which is sort of the next part of what I'll talk about with gameplay capture, which is in a lot of instances, you have to kind of be your own cinematographer, you're kind of your own filmmaker within the game, not unlike doing a commercial shoot on a soundstage or on location. You would have a script, and then you'd have a shot list of, okay, I need a close-up of this actor from this angle with this lighting, with this camera, with this lens, or I need a wide shot that's tracking across and panning and tilting, or we need a dolly moving in towards the vehicle. Whatever the camera movement is, you plan that out in advance. In a lot of ways, we do that with gameplay capture, not to be manipulative, because we always try to make sure that whatever camera movements that we're doing, whatever lighting that we're manipulating, it is indicative of the quality of the final game. But like with all trailers, you have a very short amount of time to get across, 25 new levels, 16 new characters, or, whatever it is we're trying to communicate from that particular game. And the smoother the camera movements, the more specific the shots are to the feature that's being called out, just the easier it is to watch, the quote unquote easier on the eyes. And so, we'll make our shot lists, kind of figure out what camera and lens and lighting we want to use for what, particular shots, get those shots, and then work those into the edit timeline. From there, it's usually, okay, do we have everything we need working in Premiere, editing? And if we don't, we'll just go back and say, okay, we need to get some different shots from this angle. Right now, I won't say the title of the game, but it's a fishing style game that we've been working on. And man, it's something I should mention is, aside from, being able to play video games and do that on the clock, which is fun. It's better than digging ditches, yes. But also, we're trying to do it in a very economical way. We are a production company, so the number one goal is to produce. We've got deadlines and a production schedule, and so if there's not a God mode or there's not cheats turned on, a lot of times you have to learn how to play the game. And
yeah.
I'm not a good fisherman, or Patrick or Eric or Kenny. A lot of times we'll have to kind of tag team, and I'll say, man, I've been trying to catch this, pike or largemouth bass for
you haven't been using
minutes.
the right lure. That's your problem,
I guess. I mean, even with all the lures and all the rods and all the boats and all the lakes opened up, I still struggle. So we'll have to kind of figure out, okay, who's good at fighting games, who's good at fishing games, who's good at hunting games, and let the appropriate person play their genre.
Put me in, coach.
We'll have to have you out. And what's your genre? Are you a first-person shooter guy? Or
yeah, I like, my biggest jam of all times was the SOCOM franchise on the PlayStation. So I like, battle simulation, Call of Duty, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And sports games, me and my boys like to play the NBA and Madden and all that stuff. So
well, if we land EA as a client, I'll give you a call.
All right, perfect.
They're still the 800 or 8,000 pound gorilla. I think they do all their trailers in house, but
yeah.
we can dream. Who knows?
Right. You got to keep dreaming.
So yeah, that's if you ever wondered, that's kind of the process of gameplay capture here at Mediajuice. And now you know, and knowing
is half the battle.
Go Joe.
It's time for this week's cutscene, and we're going to talk even more VR. I know we just talked a bunch with Randy about this, but you're going to tell us about your VR rig. So, what's going on in the Sneed household?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had a VR, quote unquote VR rig since the first Oculus.
Okay.
But as Randy mentioned in his segment, you really, to run an Oculus, you have to have a pretty beefy PC, which I have, but to fire that up and to get it working and have enough space in my office, which is where I keep my PC, I got to kind of move some stuff around, which I've done. And we've done demos, like I mentioned, for different celebrity talent that's been a part of shoots that we've done for Unlocked and other projects. And so it's good to have that Oculus rig because it's easy to fire up here in the office. But I don't know, a few weeks ago, I went to GameSpot. I've done that for 10 years, not GameSpot, GameStop. I went to GameStop and bought the new VR, the new PlayStation VR.
Oh yeah,
bundle, the one that comes with the Move sticks, the headset, the receiver, everything. And what stuck out to me is how it delivers on the promise. I mean, I got this thing set up. It took me about an hour to get it all set up, and I put in Batman. They've got a Batman Arkham game for PlayStation VR, and fired that up. And just seeing your hand looking down. I mean, you're holding these Move controllers, but you're looking down, and you see Batman's hands.
Yeah,
and you look down and you see his utility belt, and you can literally take your hand and take the batarang off, or take the grappling hook off and shoot it and look up, and it shoots, and it moves you, or quote unquote moves you. And it's crazy because I think until I played that VR game, the Batman VR, I didn't realize it really, the VR now, current gen VR really does deliver on the promise. It's not the holodeck, it's not Lawnmower Man, but it's pretty spectacular. It's not the Matrix, it's not tactile feedback yet, but it's pretty awesome. I mean, I think, I've shown a couple of people in my living room so far, just kind of have them put it on and fire up that Batman game, and the reaction's the same every time. Like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. That you're wearing a headset, and that you're standing in a living room, not the Batcave, but it's awesome. I think, just to reflect everything Randy said, it's like, yes, there's going to be a long time until we get to the holodeck, or we get to a point where the whole world can enjoy it. But being someone that lives in America, that I can write it off as a business expense. Wait a minute, are we recording? Yes, we are.
It seems completely legit for the line of work you're in. So
actually, it is. I got also like a flight game where you're an eagle.
Oh, cool.
A driving game.
Have you done the TIE Fighter one yet, or the X-Wing simulation?
No, I need to get Star Wars Battlefront for.
Yes,
I've got it for Xbox, but not for PlayStation 4. I need to get it for PlayStation 4 so I can do that.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, my brother has the whole VR rig with the move sticks and all of that. And it is the TIE Fighter, or the X-Wing simulator, is very, very cool. And you're totally right. It totally delivers on what it says it is. I've played on it some, and there's times when people like bump me in the real world while I'm playing this thing, and I'm like, what was that? Like, it freaks me out because like it totally breaks that virtual experience. And it's just it's freaky how much you can get immersed into it. Just with the suggestive qualities of the visuals and the audio.
Yeah. I did the same thing. I was like, playing that Batman game, and I, took a couple of steps to my right to grab something, and my leg ran into the ottoman, and I was like, oh yeah, there's things that,
I still exist in the real world.
Yeah. Glassesless VR, it's hard to imagine, but honestly, it's like whatever that Murphy's Law or Moore's Law or whatever that thing, that talks about technology doubling and tripling and whatever that metric is. It's like we couldn't have imagined an iPhone, 15, 20 years ago. It just would have been magic, when I'm 60 or 70, to imagine, hopefully I'm still a gamer at that time. Hopefully I'm still playing and, or have kids that keep me up on all the latest trends.
Yeah, I feel like, glassless VR is probably a long ways off. But I feel like those headsets are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. over
I think you're right.
the next few generations. Like it'll be like you put on sunglasses kind of thing.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, if you are thinking about it and you've got an extra, I think $500 or $600, it's definitely worth checking out any kind of VR, but the PlayStation VR. If you have a PS4, it's fairly straightforward to set up, and you're just ready and you're good to go.
Okay, it's time for the script notes segment, and this is the time of the show when we hear from you, the listeners.
The listeners.
That's right. You can write in to mediajuicepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Mediajuice Studios, or like those who are contributing today, you can tweet at Mediajuice Twit. And yeah, first up is Clive on Twitter. He says, "What's it like working with Sean Astin?" And he wants to know, has he told you what's going to happen in Stranger Things Season 2?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've gotten the first part of that question several times. Okay, let me take this in two parts. What's it like working with Sean? What's it like working with Sean Astin?
Has he come down off of the high of Encino Man? Like, is he? I mean, I know that was
you never come off of that. Yeah, that's a high that you take to the grave, my friend.
Right.
It's great. Sean is a force of nature. You know, I think I might have said this in a previous episode, but you know, when Sean gets an idea in his head, it's good. If he's on your team, it's great because he's like, this is what we need to do. However we do it, this is what we need. You know, we need to go to Japan and film for 3 weeks and follow one of these esports players, and which is great. He's got enthusiasm, he's got focus, and you know, my challenge as a producer is of course then just taking that energy and marrying that focus and passion with whatever resources we have available for the shoot, for the series, and you know, done that on a couple of different projects now. But Sean's just great. He is one of the best advocates you could have on your side when producing as an independent, because I think Sean, even though he is who he is and is very famous, he has this, at least for me anyway, this there's a camaraderie of knowing like I'm an independent producer. I'm bootstrapping this thing. I don't have 20th Century Fox behind me. And I think he gets that because I think he's, you know, he's a scrapper. He's out there trying to make a living and trying to be a working actor, and very much is. Just to have someone like that in your corner, and he has been for years now, is awesome. You know, and he's just a lot of fun and a good friend, and we have deep conversations about life and family, and so yeah, it's great. And I think my takeaway with the two projects that Sean and I have worked on is have Sean involved in your independent film project. All you independent producers out there, it will only help you.
Awesome.
And then the second part of that question, I would say no comment, but I guess to give a little bit longer answer, yeah, no. That's he's appropriately not commenting on Stranger Things, and neither will I. I know that he's had a lot of fun on it, and I saw, not related to the question, but somewhat related, that Netflix just announced that they greenlit season 3.
Oh, cool!
Stranger Things, which is cool.
Good.
So can't wait to see Sean in season 2. It's gonna be awesome.
All right, so our second question also comes from Twitter. @Nui says, "Have you ever considered putting Unlocked on YouTube?"
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, I had a conversation with David Perry of Shiny Entertainment fame and Earthworm Jim and Matrix, pretty famous game designer, and he has been involved in both of my gaming documentary projects. He mentioned that about a year ago when we were in the process of setting up distribution for Unlocked. He's like, "Man, you ought to just put this on YouTube as 4 and 5 minute segments and generate advertising." And at the time I was like, well, we're trying to go a little more classic distribution just on existing platforms that, behind a paywall. So we could, make the budget back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is where the show's at now. It's on iTunes, it's on Google Play, it's on Steam, it's on Xbox, it's coming to PlayStation Network.
Okay.
And I think we'll probably keep it behind the paywall there, whatever it is, $1.99, $2.99 per episode, just to try to recoup the investment a little bit longer. But I think eventually getting those advertising dollars on YouTube makes sense, but probably not in any time in the foreseeable, 12 to 24 months. But good idea.
Good idea, as always. Yeah.
And also, I mean, just with all the Mediajuice talk that we've been doing about, projects that we're working on and things that are happening here at Mediajuice. If you're interested in what we talk about, behind the scenes and making of and stuff like that, I think you'd find Unlocked episode 8 of particular interest.
Yes.
Because that's you've watched Unlocked, right?
I haven't watched all of them yet, but I did skip ahead to episode 8 because that was the homework you gave me when we first got together on this project. He said, check out episode 8 because it gives a really good rundown of kind of who you are in Mediajuice Studios and the process and all that stuff. So yes, I do know episode 8 well.
Yeah. So that's, if you're interested in this podcast, you'd probably be interested in episode 8 of Unlocked, which then might get you interested in the rest of the episodes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, check it out. And good question at, what was it?
At Nui. All right, well, I think that's going to do it. We're going to put a wrap on this episode. Want to thank Randy Pitchford for joining us today. That was a great conversation, lots of fun
Randy.
Catching up with him. We want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Please, if you have 3 seconds to give us a rating and a review over on iTunes, it's super helpful. If you like the show enough, you can even subscribe to it there, and you'll get a little alert every time an episode comes out. And as always, you can find us over on MediajuiceStudios.com, and you can write to us at MediajuicePodcast@gmail.com. Did I forget anything?
Here's the one thing you forgot, which is it's Mediajuice. It's media and it's juice.
Trademark 2017.
That's right.
All rights reserved.
I don't think we're going to switch to that tagline, but I just wanted to try it out on the air, and that's confirmed to me that we will keep Mediajuice where ideas come to life. I think that's a little better.
Okay. All right. Well, you gotta wrestle with those things sometimes.
That's right. You got to do it on the air. Okay.
That's right.
Thanks, guys. Thanks to Randy Pitchford. Thanks for talking to us, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode.